All right. It's Monday already. The wise guys back at it.
We just recorded one like 3 days ago.
We did. We got all thrown off. The weather has just not behaved itself. We need spring to chill, to seriously chill, and it's going to do that this week.
Or get really warm, and so there's no any chill left. It's just all warmth from here on out.
We're currently 50 degrees with drizzle on a Monday afternoon. We were 85 on Saturday.
That is how our Friday was. It was cloudy, it was drizzle, and it was just like, man,
that's nap
I'm trying to stay awake. Exactly.
They should have adult naps. I go to my son's class and they got nap time. I'm like, can we integrate that to adult workplaces?
If you do the evening show, there's a big gap between the 6 o'clock and the 10 o'clock news. Then you can.
Yeah, we got no gaps here in the morning. We got the morning show, we got cut-ins, we got a lifestyle show, we got a meeting, and then we got a show. And here we are. Favorite part of the week right here, Weather Wise Guys. Thanks for watching. This is episode 14. We're making it, man.
Wow.
Here's what we're talking about this week. This is fun stuff. See, me and Wes, we get into these conversations in previous episodes, and it helps us build on additional, content ideas. So if you live in a city center, have ever been there, you're going to want to stick around for this. It's pretty fascinating, the research this guy's doing. And then we got other cool stuff, too. Too many to name, but some other stuff. There's your tease.
Other cool stuff.
Cool. It's neat, pretty neat. All right, so we'll start with the recap. On Friday, we touched on the severe weather that was April 2nd and 3rd last week, which is kind of the start of that really busy setup for us. This is a look at, ignore that banner there. This is a look at the storm reports from Friday. And the same spots again and again. That ridge, like as cool as it was for a lot of people here in Alabama, they were all excited cleaning out their pools. This is like the negative side of that ridge. These systems couldn't go anywhere. It was just day after day. And, once again, Friday and Saturday, both just, the tornado numbers went down, but there was so much rain, flooding was thrown in there too. But, again, another 4 tornado reports there. And on the 4th, we had 14 tornado reports. So I don't know what the total was for Arkansas last week, but it was, I feel like, pretty significant.
A lot. You talk about a ridge, and there's a trough ridge pattern. Can you just draw out where these pieces are and how they relate to all these different storm reports? I don't know if you can actually get take the cursor and just draw it so people kind of understand where the ridge is at in this. Because just me and you, by looking at this, it's like, all right, obviously, if it's warmer in the southeast, there's a ridge there, and where the trough and the ridge start to collide, that's where you're getting the severe weather.
Because it is a studio graphic, it doesn't want me to illustrate, but I actually had something on this. So here, let's stand by. I've got something, but
right.
The whole setup, though, was interesting in the sense that we had 2 places in Alabama hit 90. And that was the earliest 90-degree reading for one of them. And for another, it was the second earliest of all time. So, it was a big difference in temperature from here to, what were you last week, temperature-wise?
Pretty lame. I think it was 50s. A little on the cooler side. Our weather last week, thankfully, other than the whole thunderstorm situation that happened on Tuesday, either Monday or Tuesday, where we had the one tornado in our area, it really wasn't that bad, thankfully, because we're more so in the trough area of this trough ridge pattern. And so you had that stationary front back to where we saw all those storm reports is essentially where a front has been laid across. And so all the cool weather was moving over to Kansas City. Meanwhile, all the warm weather was on top of Evan and Birmingham. And right in the middle is where the severe weather happened for a week.
Yeah. And the reference I used, because I did an explainer on this last week, and when I was doing the forecast, I said, have you ever been driving down the interstate and there's 2 or 3 lanes closed? Well, the traffic's not going to stop driving on the interstate there's just a big, barrier there. So everything either stops or has to go up and around. And it was just a huge backup. The atmosphere, similar to traffic, is constantly flowing. These systems coming out of the Rockies not going to stop. They keep going, but there's nowhere for them to go, and so they kept running into the same spots time and time again. Meanwhile, across the western U.S., you had this pretty decent trough, some snow in the Rockies, some beautiful snow in a few places in the upper Great Plains west. But did you guys end up getting snow, by the way?
No, we didn't. And there may have been a little bit of snow in Oklahoma or in the Ozarks, but nah, it was nothing for us.
I saw one of the meteorologists in Oklahoma City shared that there was some snow there, which is much further south than you, which sometimes is hard to imagine. You're like, oh, snow's got to be
Yeah,
north, but the setup sometimes doesn't work that way.
it is weird. Sometimes there's just a lack of moisture, a certain far north, but it is further south, and so yeah, it gets a little bit wonky. And there is obviously plenty of moisture off to the south
This
in all forms.
this was crazy. So I actually haven't looked at these yet, but these are 5 day
Look at
totals.
Kentucky, man. Yeah,
Um,
that's nuts.
I thought we had a lot here. We had one rain gauge get to 5.4 over the whole storm total, but four of that fell in a 3 hour stretch and washed out some roads.
Looks like down there, near Mobile had a nice little stripe
Oh
of
boy,
10.
10. And you know what's funny about that is because of the ridge, most of this rain all came in one day. Mobile, actually, I saw a video. I don't know where it was, but had a couple feet of water near the downtown area. So they probably all got that at once. Um,
Uh, yeah, and I just think of kind of like the mountainous area of Arkansas and southern Missouri had some bad flooding there. Thankfully, it looks like the Appalachian Mountains didn't have too bad of flooding.
yeah, they don't need any
Um,
more.
yeah, for real, they're good on weather for like 5 years.
Seriously, that was and April's such a loaded. You just never know what you're going to get because you got the cold air fighting back. It doesn't want to leave. Spring's trying to arrive, and in our case, summer because we were close to 90. But these clashing air masses, man, that's what keeps weather very interesting this time of year.
Yeah, yeah, and I think down across the southeast. I just remember when I lived there, when I was working there. This is, and we may get to this part, so we don't have to get too in depth on right now. But I feel like we're getting close to the climatological peak of severe weather season for you all across the southeast.
Yep, and we'll actually have that later on in the show. But before we can get there, this topic I'm pretty fond of that Wes actually brought up. So he's your wise guy, Wes. And if you've ever heard about the
So,
urban heat island, um, it's pretty fascinating. I'll let you take it away.
yeah, man, I feel like every year I do an explainer on what the urban heat island is, and it's like, does everybody know what this is yet? And some people don't. Um, but I guess the context is everybody really knows what it is, but they don't quite know the professional nomenclature behind it. And the urban heat island is just simply enough. The inner city is warmer in most times than the outlying areas. The times when it is not warmer is when you are in a drought because the urban areas people have sprinklers, they water their lawns, and so that will help offset the urban heat island, and so you'll get pretty much an area surrounded by dirt and rock end up being warmer. The dirt and rock area is the outlying areas than the inner city areas, but most of the time it is warmer in the city than the outlying. Even if you're going, I don't know, from like north to south, the north side of town is closer to the cooler air, and you're going from north to south. You're going like where the word city is,
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City, and then where the hump is. It is generally warmer and then colder. And then from going to where the hump is to where city is, reverse, it's getting hottest and then a little bit cooler. So it's simply just because it's rock and metal.
That's how Birmingham is, and that's why like whenever we have like the potential for a frost or a freeze, which we have upcoming, we always say Birmingham's going to be warm, but our Birmingham sensor doesn't speak for the rest of the county because the county's huge and it gets very rural. So if you see that number and you live in Jefferson County, it's misleading because that sensor is at the airport, which is very close to downtown. So very interesting that you bring up too the drought. I had not thought of that. That's a great tidbit there. When it's drier, that it actually could be cooler because less water.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
crazy. Um, and the urban heat island is usually most pronounced at night. If you think about like a rock, if you were to like heat up a rock, it'll radiate its heat away. Its ability to hold heat is greater. And also, in the flip side, moisture has a higher heat capacity. Water has a higher heat capacity. That's why lakes and pools take longer to cool to warm up. They also take some longer to cool down. So when you have moisture already within a city in like a place where they have their backyards and front yards irrigated, that takes longer to heat up versus the outside if they would be in a drought. But yeah, cities generally 4 to 8 degrees warmer again because it's just hot metal all over the place, like a hot potato.
Yeah.
Potatoes take longer to cool down. Potatoes come from the ground.
Nice.
Voila.
I see what you did there. I feel like the infrastructure too. You think about asphalt surfaces or the buildings. Or I've got a brick house, so our house, well after the sun goes down, and it's cool, will still be very warm because the brick type of
Oh,
material, it's absorbed all that during the day and it's radiating it out. And you think about that on the big scale with the city, it makes sense that at night it cools less or so because you have this area that absorb more heat during the day. Go touch a black. No, don't do this. But a blacktop in direct sunlight, even on a cold day, absorbs. It's very hot, and at night it releases all that. And as it's releasing it, that goes into the air, of course, before into the upper atmosphere, and makes sense why parts of the city will be much warmer.
and so the city and the buildings, and it doesn't even matter if they are skyscrapers or Evan's brick house. The wind is slowed down as it goes through that. And so you're getting ventilation of the city when the wind is stronger. But if it's a calm wind, then there's no ventilation to help out. The urban heat island effect is even stronger during calm, hot summer days.
So, could you use the term a bubble or a dome, or is that something you stay away from when you talk about that?
Um, I really don't use it. I don't have any problem with it. I would say I know people describe an area high pressure as the heat dome.
I just think it's interesting that you can literally have one sector and just the influence of what is beneath it has that great of an impact. Other I put in there topographical influencers. So we're talking about the urban heat island, but if you live in proximity to certain things, it can really impact your weather. So I was looking at a study that was done in Huntsville. If you've ever been up to Huntsville, it's at the foothills of the Appalachians, right? So you've got mountains up there that are kind of just freely standing, but it creates a bit of a valley. And the research that they've done up there shows that storms will sometimes intensify between the two mountain ranges. There's I don't know the names of the mountains, but they kind of run parallel from southwest to northeast, which, as you know from being a meteorologist, a lot of supercells and storms will travel in that southwest to northeast. And the idea being that they intensify in this little valley because of an orographic effect. Now, to what end that is, I still don't know. There's a lot of this that's uncertain, but that it does play some sort of a role, it seems, in the intensification of not only individual discrete thunderstorms, but even a QLCS or a line of storms that comes through. They'll intensify to some extent and tend to rotate, and it could have something to do with the wind profiles between the mountains.
Interesting. I was not going to first guess was not orographic. I thought maybe there's some sort of thermal difference between the valley and the mountain,
And
and
that
maybe
might be it.
that
It
is.
might be just the presence of the mountains, and you got that cool air pooled in between that has some
Mhm.
sort of a thermodynamic characteristic to it. Again, a lot of the stuff doesn't have a conclusion yet because there's a lot to it. But just thinking about whatever surface you have influencing your weather is fascinating.
Yeah, and something that surprised me is that the people doing this research are not always meteorologists. They're not forecasters. They don't really have as deep of an understanding of storm structure as, let's say, me or you. So maybe they have a background in physics or fluid dynamics, and that's very much what weather is. It's very much a fluid dynamic situation. And so they're able to maybe help explain things that happen with the weather using other principles of fluid dynamics, but they just can't say like why the storm is behaving that way, which is something that uh, I kind of helped a researcher out with last week when I talked to him about the change in storm structure as storms get closer to Kansas City. And it seems like this can happen. I mean, this may be able to happen in Birmingham. We know it happens in Atlanta, Indianapolis, Houston, New York City, Beijing, and St. Louis. I don't know if I said that one or not yet.
That was the one I actually read about, Wes, was the Beijing study. And that's a massive, massive city. Um,
Yeah, they're huge. So it's like when you have a gigantic city, like yes, that makes sense. Like uh, these are giant storm structures, and it's a giant city, and like yeah, you can understand. Like if the urban heat island is there, then yeah, I'm sure there can be some sort of influence. One thing that I talked to a researcher about last year is that she did a research, or she researched a thunderstorm that seemed to bend around the city of Kansas City. So there's a storm that started off to the northwest of town. The urban heat island was affected, so it was warmer on the inside. But as that storm was being pushed into the city, it actually curled around the outskirts of the city where there was a difference between the warmer air and the cooler air. And so as it went through that kind of boundary, you can call it a stationary boundary or that clash in temperatures, the storm grew. It was able to make hail, intensify in precipitation rate and everything. And so as it kind of rode around the city, did its thing, finished its loop when the temperature contrast between the city and the rural area ended. It continued on the flow that it originally had
huh.
before it encountered the city. And the way that they were able to figure out if this was just luck is that they ran multiple simulations of this. They reenacted the atmosphere. They took away the city. They added the city. They adjusted the roughness, the friction, and they found that this that storm only reacts when the city is there.
Wow, that is so cool, especially the riding around the city. Because so I used Atlanta when I built this, but it's kind of what Wes is talking about. But if you're familiar with Atlanta, that's I-285. It's almost like the storm hopped on 285, went around the city. You mentioned the
Change 4 lanes to the other side
nope,
without blinking.
no blinkers. Oh man, Atlanta's rough. But so with this, that clash, I used 86 and 91 as the temperatures, just relatively, it can be different than that. But is that kind of like a micro front or a mini front? Is that what you think is the real jumping off point? Is just like I don't want to say a mini cold front, but that it intensifies the cell or the storm?
Yeah, it's like I equate it to like a mini stationary front essentially because it's not really moving. The temperature difference will always be there. And so it's hitting that, and that's a source of lift because we call it a baroclinic zone, very scientific. And so it's going through this baroclinic zone, you're getting greater lift. And then because of the pollution coming off of the city, and it's not like Kansas City is necessarily like an overly polluted, gross city. Just every city has pollution to some level. Even Atlanta. This is something that I learned is that even if Atlanta didn't have any pollution, it would actually still have bad air quality because of the pollen levels that have in that city. So
Huh.
the storm is taking in the air pollution, and that allows for more condensation nuclei to be ingested into the storm. And so you can get more instances of small hail.
Interesting. The condensation nuclei
It's
part,
crazy.
that's cool because the little we call it particulate matter. So when we talk about the pollen count, it's like 2.5 parts per million. So that's how many little particles are around, and water will condense on those. I hadn't thought of it in the context of hail though, but that's another interesting one. And growing up in Atlanta, I didn't pay enough attention to the motion of these, but I do know that it was always warmer there. and we would occasionally see these thunderstorms pulse up and rapidly intensify over Atlanta, but then dissipate. And that's pretty common of convective storms anyway. But good bet that maybe an urban area has something to do with those intensification. I can't remember if you said this already, but what about the splitting part of it, or is that separate?
So they're related. And ironically, the researcher I talked to last year and then the guy I talked to this year, they like know each other and they've previously butted heads on storm evolution ideas. Apparently, like it's a very small world in the atmospheric science research community, just like it's a small world in the atmospheric broadcast community. And so I didn't even know these two people knew each other, but they're very like highly acclaimed researchers in their fields that, of course, they like cross paths. But their research is related. So going back to the idea of the urban heat island, if you have an urban heat island and it's very pronounced or it's very strong, that usually comes with wind of light speeds because there's no ventilation. And so what you get is exactly what Evan was just talking about. You will get a thunderstorm that will develop over the city. Once it gets tall enough, it gets picked up by the steering winds or the mid-level, low-level winds. It gets then pushed off the city, and then you have that rain. They have like that thunderstorm that shows up over Lake Lanier in Atlanta. That happens like 5 times a summer.
Yeah.
Just keeps on happening.
You had wanted this graphic to show, and sorry if I didn't pop it up at the right time, but this is a QLCS structure, which does that kind of go hand in hand with what you were?
Yes, So I was just about to get to that. So this is perfect timing.
Sweet.
So what this researcher has found out, and his name is Bob Bornstein. He's been researching this for 20 years. What he's found out was the first effect happens in a weak urban heat island with strong wind. You'll get storms developing over the city center, and they get carried away by the strong wind. But underneath a weak urban heat island event, or I'm sorry, backtracking here. Strong urban heat island, light wind, storms develop over the city, they get pushed away. Weak urban heat island, strong wind, because those do go hand in hand. Your city's being ventilated by the strong wind. You will get this storm splitting. But he had to change his naming convention to be bifurcation because whenever he started to submit his papers to meteorological journals, they're like, you can't call it splitting, storms already split. Like supercells already split, things already split. So in order to separate the two phenomenon, it's called bifurcation. So at the front of the storm is feeding off warm rising air. On the back side of the storm, it's continuously reinforcing itself by rain-cooled air. And then the steering winds, the mid-level winds, are pushing the storm along. So what will happen is as the storm approaches the city, and again, this has been found to happen in St. Louis, Indianapolis, Beijing, Houston, New York City, that warm rising air is slowed down when it's coming off of the city because the wind is being blocked by the roughness or the friction of the buildings. And it's not just like the downtown buildings. It's any building and like homes, businesses, strip malls, anything related to a metropolitan area. So that slows down your inflow. And so when you slow down your inflow, but the thunderstorms, at least initially, are still ongoing, that means the cooler air then undercuts the warm air. And so then you no longer have that rising motion on the front. That middle part of the storm, which was feeding off the air coming off the city, then becomes downdraft dominant. And so as it's getting pushed toward the city, or as it's moving toward the city, that part that is going over the city is mainly downdraft dominant and stays downdraft dominant, and that part of the storm then dissipates as it goes through the city. As it gets through the city, the friction, the wind being blocked, and you're on the other side of the city, that inflow is then able to recover. The warm rising air picks up, and then you get the balance of the warm and the cooler air. One signature that they found with this is that you will get 2 strong areas of returns on reflectivity, or 2 kind of pieces of thunderstorms on the north and the south side of the city, because that is where you're able to keep that balance in the line going. And so it's like I said, it's a going across strong, weakens as it begins to hit the flow, bifurcates or splits, goes over the city, the flow begins to return, and then it strengthens back again on the other side. And I think that it's kind of hard to believe. And I don't think this doesn't happen in every case. Because 2 Sundays ago, this happened. Last Tuesday, this did not happen. So, like, it happens, but it doesn't happen. Um, but it helps to explain at least why storms behave the way that they do at times.
Have you noticed, or did you come across this in the research? Is there a certain temperature? Like, it does it need to be a warm summer day, or can it be really any time of the year as long as there's that contrast?
I think it really come. I forget what the drought situation needs to be.
But so,
I
I mean, just the
think
point of that, there's a
if
lot of variables at it. So, like to build off what you said, this doesn't happen every time in every city, but there's certain setups that lead to this.
yes, there definitely is, and I think like it needs to be some sort of line. Maybe it doesn't always have to be a squall line. It can be a weak line of thunderstorms. You know, it doesn't have to be like a raging QLCS or MCS because maybe like if it's raging, maybe like the city, maybe just Kansas City isn't big enough to mess with the mechanics of this. But if it's a small to medium line, maybe it is. I the only two things that were like certain impacts were the fact that it had to be a weak urban heat island with strong wind.
Interesting. That's fascinating stuff. We could have spent the whole 30 minutes just on that, and how that can affect, because, a lot of times what we're trying to figure out sometimes after the fact is why things happen or why things moved a certain way or didn't move a certain way. And this is one of those that I don't think, unless I knew it going into it, I'd be able to identify it as it's happening. I couldn't say for certain that this happens in Birmingham or that I've ever seen it. I've seen storms meander, and the steering wind. Say we have a little summertime thunderstorm that's drifting north, and then all of a sudden, the heat from Birmingham causes the initial cell bottoms out. There's an outflow boundary that goes right towards the hot air coming off of Birmingham, and then that'll explode a cell after the sun's gone down. So in the
Mhm.
summertime, we'd see that no more daytime heating, but that boundary is still there. That warm air is still in place. So that cool air outflow from one storm feeds right into that. And then,
Well, something that I was actually causing this was the fact that the air coming off of the city had a higher relative humidity and would therefore be drier. And so it's like, couldn't that in some instances then be detrimental to
yeah,
a thunderstorm? Like, yes, it's warm rising air, but dry air
drier,
is
yeah.
not good.
Huh. A lot of
And
layers.
so I think like there really isn't one answer to every single situation, and that's what makes this really difficult for I think that maybe not just the general public to understand, but for like all meteorologists, unless you like sit down and try to like explain that when these situations can happen, they're just going to be like, no, storms just do stuff you don't explain, like for whatever reason. It's like, yes, like sometimes that happens, but not every situation is inexplicable.
I think it's good too that somebody who's not a meteorologist, and this might not make sense, but who's not a meteorologist studied this, because as we know, fluid dynamic, we're studying motion within a fluid. We treat the atmosphere as a fluid, but we're so set in like how we think the atmosphere works that we might be too close to identify something like that. So maybe that's why he was able to figure that out. Um, Something I was always fascinated with, it's a different process but similar, is the sea breeze front. When I lived in Dothan, every day from late May until sometime in September, if we had southerly winds, there was a sea breeze front. Cool air coming from the Gulf, this is relatively speaking, would move in as we're in the 90s. So cold air's, moving in to take the place of that warm rising air over land. And you would see it get to about I-10. If you're familiar with the Florida Panhandle, it get to about I-10, and that was about 30 miles inland, give or take, where you're at. And then all of a sudden they'd hit this boundary and explode. Well, they'd eventually get to
Mm.
Dothan every single day. They would sometimes miss, sometimes get there. But that's another thing. If you live close to, like, the Florida Peninsula, Central Florida every day has sea breeze fronts coming from both sides, from the Atlantic and the Gulf, and they clash. but that's just another example of how topography, the surface, plays a role in the type of weather you can have on a day-to-day basis.
Apparently, the sea breeze, this is what they found in New York City. The sea breeze effect also happens in New York City, and the city can mess with that effect as well. It probably comes down to the magnitude of the sea breeze in the city and everything. And apparently, forest can mess with this as well, which is why I was like, I don't know if this can happen in Birmingham. If the forest is already, accounting for this friction effect, I don't know how much it'll happen.
There's a
But
lot
there's no forest around here.
Yeah, there's a lot and that's one of the things when people come in like job shadow, I say this field you're always learning. Just when you think you've figured everything out, there's always something to learn, and that is something I did not know. So that was good stuff. Maybe this should be Wes's weather wise guy and friend.
Nah, I get stuff wrong all the time, so I am not wise, but I share the same just like interest and like fascination as you. I
Yeah.
talked to this dude for like 2 hours. I was like,
Oh man.
this is crazy.
And we could talk a long time about this too, just because it's right in that wheelhouse of figuring out why stuff works. I have to like catch myself during weathers, not getting too explainy. So because it's fun. But speaking of temperatures and changes here, we'll segue to the forecast here, and this will be quick because it's a pretty easy forecast. The story here,
Yeah,
Wes, is going
that's
to
what I'm
be the
talking about,
fact
baby.
that
Easy forecasts.
I don't know. I'm like really happy about this because I have spent more time at this in this building than under my own roof. But cool air for the first half of the week. So remember that graphic we showed at the beginning of that high amplitude pattern with the ridging over the eastern U.S. We have flipped that. So basically, take that ridge and put in a trough. And for much of the week, we are having well below average temperatures, including a potential freeze in northern Alabama. And we'll see that depicted here. This is a look at the European ensemble, and you can see that, Wes. If this is kind of what you were trying to talk about earlier, drawing. So there's your ridge now over the western U.S., and your trough is now here. Last week that was flipped, and that's why we were in the 80s. Well, that Bermuda high, that high feature has completely disappeared. And now we've got cool air. I mean, 20s and 30s over the Great Lakes in New England. Um, the one thing
We're in the same type of air, actually. It looks like.
Yeah, you're like on the fringe of it. I was watching that, and you basically like the trough as you come down. It kind of bisects your viewing area much of the days, and then literally just to your east, like Illinois is going to be far cooler than you at times this week, which is not that far away. That's like Georgia or the Carolinas to us, but there's a big difference in temperature. So, this week we're below average. Long term, next week looks to like we kind of go back to that really warm setup. And real quick, with respect to it not being active, this is a look at the surface modeling here, and see that front moving through. I mean, that's a dry frontal pass. That's just a
Speaking,
reinforcing front. That's what I call it anyway. It just helps to reinforce the cool air that's in place, and it's gonna be enough moisture for us to get some rain here, but it won't be severe. I was like celebrating all morning doing these forecast hits that we have a cold front that's not bringing severe. A cold front with no
yeah,
severe, and then look at that by Saturday. I mean, most of the country minus New England is quiet. Love to see that because this time of year can be an absolute what for severe weather. So speaking of,
oh yeah. I'll be. Well, it'll just be a week or so, and then we'll be back.
yeah, so you disappeared. Where'd you
I'm
go?
coming back. Just a second. I'm
Oh,
coming
okay.
back.
So I'll talk about this. This is a look at the probability of severe weather for this week in April. So this looks at April 8th, and you can see the probability of severe within 25 miles. That's how we do everything. Wes talked about it last week with the risk, the SPC issues. When they put a high risk there, they're expecting the potentially strong tornado within 25 miles, multiple tornadoes within a 25-mile radius of any given area. So for this particular week in April, the highest severe probability is actually in Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas, which I would not have guessed. We fall under that as well here in central northern Alabama. And then I went and broke it down a little bit further here. I just thought we'd look at tornado probabilities, which again surprised me. So Wes, our
Yeah.
tornado probabilities actually peaked in late March based off of this data. Now, this is a range. This is a
Huh.
study done from 1982 to 2011. Um, and so in that time frame, at least, which you stands to reason, that's a pretty good summary of what we get here. But this is the time of year we start to see that severe threat head in your direction towards the plains. And then the jet stream doesn't get down here, so we don't have dynamic support. We still have good fronts that come through, but the warm air starts to win here, and we stay warm. We don't get those good cold pushes, but in the middle of the country, you'll still get that. Would you say April, May, you start to pick up?
Yeah, especially late April through mid May is pretty much our tornado season. And then once you get late May into June, that's when it becomes squall line season,
Oh yeah.
MCS season, and then you hit mid June to July, and you kind of you kind of start to simmer down once you get to that summertime. So yeah, every man for the next month and a half is pretty much going to be it for us. It was going to be our spring severe weather season. Hasn't really been bad so far. Just one tornado. I've had a couple of late nights, but gosh, man, um, compared to last year, this has been very easy, which is great because we're a little short-handed on the weather team right now. So I will not complain at all.
Yes, I will send some of the weather your way then. So, as always, I like to do who's hot and who's not because I think it is fascinating the temperature differences across the country. So,
I
this
like to do
was
it too. Okay, I like
this,
to do it too.
all right, all right.
You're
Well,
not
that's
alone.
piddles around in this as well. So, this one actually had a new location on the map, and it is also up in Michigan. We can actually say this one though, Doe Lake. How about that? Laredo.
Great hunting.
Yeah, nice. I didn't even think about that. I was like, oh
I'm
yeah,
sure
it's a
there's
lake up
great
there.
hunting there.
But yeah, absolutely. There you go. Some good hunting for you. But 106 South Texas. I don't think I realized um, how hot it actually gets there that early in the year. So if you've been following us at all, the last 4 weeks there's been a city in South Texas that has made this, and it's been 100 plus every single time. And I mentioned last time that our the DMA there, the Brownsville DMA, actually has had all but I believe four of the stations in their market, the weather sensors, Mesonet, ASOS stations, have hit 100 degrees or greater. That was in March. March.
March.
So anyway,
That's I will never forget Laredo, Texas, for one reason, selfishly, and that coming like our senior year, they I tried to hire me to work as the morning meteorologist and the morning anchor.
I don't think I knew that.
It was crazy because like we had to do stuff other than weather, like our little journalism classes. They made us do stuff, and yeah, something was weird. Like they didn't want me to tour. They didn't want me to tour the station, or at least they didn't want to pay for me to come tour the station, to come visit the city. I was like looking up Laredo, Texas, and I was like, I don't think I would like living here. This is really weird. And they just wanted me to sign a contract without coming to see the station. I was like, this seems really off.
That is
And I
off.
didn't. And then Evan beat me for our first job.
Yeah, so a little background on that. Actually, do some background on that. I messed something up here, so I got to fix something, and then we're going to
All right,
continue.
some background on that. Evan and I were seniors. I believe we were still seniors, and yeah, Evan and I interviewed for the same job in Dothan, Alabama. I went in. I don't know if I went in first or second. We didn't interview the exact
You
same
went
day, but
first. You got there
I
before
went
me because
first.
I thought, dang it. But
So
yes,
I went in first. Talked with Nate, and that was probably like my first actual like interview in person. And so went to Dothan, drove over to Dothan from Starkville, interviewed for like 8 hours, drove back, and man, I don't even know if we had realized that that Evan and I were interviewing from the same job until maybe like after that I had done it or something.
So when I
Like,
went down there, they told me another recent graduate from Mississippi State um, had applied and interviewed. Um, and they didn't tell me who. I found out later that it was you. Um, and just a small world that we were both in Dothan, and literally right after graduating in December. By the way, we had to do an extra half victory lap because we weren't. At least me, I was not good enough. My physics, man, that hurt. That was a toughie for me, is getting through the physics and the calculus.
it was my differential equations, and then the class that I needed was only offered in the fall, so I worked in some extra stuff there. But yeah, essentially, I went in there and was nervous and was just my speech rate was just super fast, and I just wasn't good enough. And then Evan came in, and they're like, "This guy is a lot better." So they ended up hiring Evan, and then a few months later, I ended up getting a job a little closer to home. So it ended up working out really well for both of us. Evan got a job in Dothan, where he was decently close to Kennesaw, relatively
Yep.
speaking,
It
and
was
then
it was
I
like three and a
was
half, 4 hours. Not bad at all.
okay. Yeah, and then I got a job in Springfield, Missouri, um, where I was also about 3 hours away from home. So we met in Mississippi. We went our separate ways back to our general home areas for our first job. Um, but I would say that my first job was super important in my overall like learning of how to forecast. We took forecasting classes and we learned all the meteorology and everything like that. But until you're actually like punished for missing a forecast, like psychologically, you don't really start to learn how to do it.
If anyone is aspiring to be a meteorologist, know this: you can be really good in class and really, I feel like, well equipped with grades and everything, but the real world is where you learn everything. You might be able to have the basic ideas, in place, but there is nothing quite like missing. I remember the first day I missed it by 9 degrees, and Nate, who you were talking about, um, he came in and asked me what happened, and I was new, um, and I didn't know what to say because I wasn't sure how I got it that wrong. Like missing a high temperature for you out there listening by 9 degrees on a day where rain. I don't think rain was involved. Maybe it was, um, but
I missed one by 15 one time because a cold front came through 4 hours earlier than it was supposed to.
4 hours. How did it accelerate 4 hours without you knowing,
I
Wes?
I don't even know. I don't even know. So if you unless you miss one by 15, uh, you're good.
Yeah. All this to say, it's pretty cool that we circled back and we're able to do this podcast together, because I think it's a lot of fun. And whether you guys love the content or not, we're going to keep churning it out. But feel free to comment on that. And with that, we'll get to the end of this here. I know Wes has got some stuff he's got to take care of today.
Oh, you're good. I moved out of the office, so
Oh, good. Then
we
I
can
can
go.
I can ramble about our astronomy
Yeah,
here.
pink moon.
All right. So I didn't have time to do it this time, but I think on the next time we have a full moon, I'm going to put up there all the names and where they come from. But
Yes.
because I know Wes just loves the names. So this week we actually get like a glimpse of Sirius. So that's the dog star. If you've ever heard the dog days of summer, that term actually comes from seeing this star. So the ancient Romans,
Huh.
in the middle of July, I believe it's July 3rd to August 9th, somewhere in there, this star was the most readily seen in the sky. Well, the constellation it's part of is shaped like a dog if you trace it together and whatnot. So the dog days of summer came about because they would see this star at that time of year overhead, and they knew that hot weather was coming. And it's just another fascinating thing that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they had connections to figure out what was coming. So it became the dog days of summer, and we get to see Sirius for, I think, one of the first times. If you look southwest this week, I think if you hold up like a fist, or so. I don't exactly know how high it is, but it's pretty low. If you can find Orion, if you're familiar with the Orion constellation, which is a pretty common one that you'll see, you may have seen it and not even realized. Go directly below that, and you'll see Sirius. It should be the brightest star.
Oh,
Yeah. Mars is
I'm
also
gonna.
in there, but Mars has had enough attention this year, so I didn't put it on this map. You'll be able to see Mars as well.
Is that
Um,
hold on, is this Orion Belt serious situation? Is that like can I go see that tonight?
I think so. It begins this week. It might
Okay,
not be till Wednesday that you can see it everywhere. If you don't have a tree line, you might be able to. But the degree it is above the surface, I think, is the iffy part. If you'll be able to see it or not. But you should be able to see it in the southwestern horizon shortly after the sun goes down. I think they said that I saw within about an hour or so, give or take. But later this week, also, we've got the full pink moon. You want to guess what that's named for?
Jigglypuff.
I don't think they had that back in the 1700s. A lot of these were named. So the Native Americans actually recognized there was a certain flower that would bloom every year, sometime in April, and they knew that the full moon was coming, and it was the fourth one of the calendar year, and so they called it the full pink moon. And they knew that there was a lot of things about to be in bloom. There was a lot of pollen out, and things were about to be full on growing season. So the pink moon, there it is, and
I
it
love it.
peaks at it peaks. It's on the 12th, but it'll appear full on the 11th as well to the naked eye. And it's a micro moon, Wes. We don't ever talk about micro moons. We always talk about super moons. This is the
A
exact
tiny
opposite. It's
moon.
mini. So,
A
for
tiny
those of you who
moon.
don't
I
know,
was just looking. Like, is it?
and I can't hear Wes. It cut out. What
Sorry.
were you saying?
Hope I'm back. Isn't the May moon
Did you
like the
mute
flower
yourself?
moon or something?
This is great, great content.
Did I? Hold on. Am I here?
Well, until he gets his audio fixed, I'll keep talking. So a micromoon, the moon orbiting around Earth is elliptical, right? So that's not a perfect circle. So there's times when it's closer, times when it's further, called perigee and aperigee. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but this is going to be that time when the moon is at its furthest away in its orbit, and that's why it will appear slightly smaller, but still respect the full moon. You'll
What
be able to
about
see that
now?
later this week. Yeah, I can
What
hear you
about
now.
now?
Where'd you go?
Oh, thank goodness. I don't know. I have no idea. But what I was trying to say isn't May the flower moon.
Yes, I believe so. Um,
Sweet.
and I don't know after that, but you got to think there's a lot of so like there's these flowers here called the Cahaba lilies, and they don't bloom until May. So there's certain flowers that take longer. Like we've had several already in bloom since March, but I guess some of the more vibrant ones like lilies and I don't know what else blooms, sunflowers maybe. I'm not a big garden guy. Everything I try to make grow dies. So
Not a bloomologist.
no,
You
not
just
at
do the
all.
yard work that your wife asks you to do and
I
call it
did. I
good.
was doing yard work the other day, and I texted Wes. I said, "Hey, sorry, I can't get to my computer right now." She got on this like kick of doing this yard work, and I'm like, "It's 86 degrees." But anyway, got it done. We're putting down a sandbox and a surrounding padded area for the kids so that they can play
Aw,
and not be stepping in rocks and whatnot. So it'll be nice when it's done. We'll have to share a picture on the podcast when
that
we're.
does sound very nice. I was running out of time to mow my lawn for the first time this season, and I flagged down a lawn mowing company and paid him $30 to do my lawn, and it was the most gratifying $30 I've ever spent in my life. Oh, it got to 46?
30. Okay,
Good
30
God.
bucks. That's unheard of. When I had surgery and I physically couldn't push the mower, I'm not going to tell you how much I paid, but it had several zeros, and I don't know how much grass you have, but it was a couple $100. Now, granted, I got some of the hedge in the front trimmed as well because I also couldn't like lift an arm to
Mm.
trim the hedge. But send him my way.
Sometimes people just recognize me and they just give me a discount.
I need to go
Whether or not
viral
that
again and
happened
get
here.
free lawn care. Okay,
Dude, I can't believe it got
forecast
to
competition.
46.
I know. What kind of nonsense is that? And then we had the same low temperature, but I was like a degree closer on the high.
Yeah.
But I was looking at it, and they were not 46 for long. I think it was in between hours, which will sometimes happen for the high. But very close on this one, Wes. We didn't miss by much. But I always say,
Well,
like,
thank
if
God because we were forecasting for like 6 hours before it actually happened.
you don't have to say that. Yeah, so we did our last episode on Friday. And then I was like, Wes, when do you want to do the next one? He's like, Monday. I was like, all right, we'll get back on track. Forecast for Sunday. So this is Sunday's high and then this morning's low of 33. Um, so yeah, we should have been probably spot on then, I guess.
Well, it's tough with rain. I mean, if we were both within 3, I think that's good enough.
3 degree guarantee, baby. That's
Yeah.
what we're going for. So here's where we're going next. And I just thought, why not?
Syracuse.
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 And we'll forecast this for this Saturday. I feel like we should have it in by like Thursday. I know we both forget, but technically that would mean, all right, we get close, but instead of, Wes submitting his Friday night at 10 p.m. when he's working, we got to submit it sooner than that.
All right, deal. Let's make it by 10 p.m. on Thursday.
Yeah. So like by the end of
How's
your
it?
shift.
All right. And I guess I don't know how much free time you have past 6 p.m.
Nope.
None. Okay.
I'll have to send in my forecast Thursday morning. So you're going to get a few more model runs than me, but that's okay. I don't need that.
Well, I was gonna say, is there like a fairer way to do this? Like, can we do like 10 p.m. for me on Thursday and like 6 a.m. for you on Friday? Is that
We
unless you
could.
just start like destroying me, then I would call that unfair. But
Well, I'm feeling a hot streak coming on, so I feel like I should like submit mine like a day, 2 days before you, and then maybe that'll be fair. So
all right, it works for me. Works for me.
it's good stuff today. I'm really glad you talked about that. Just another one of the many like facets of weather that we can't necessarily touch when we're just forecasting on air, but certainly something cool to like keep in the back of your mind and always something to learn with weather.
Yeah, and I think as you start to observe thunderstorms more frequently in the spring and summer, you may notice that that whole storms going around the city and intensification thing may happen. Because once I learned about it, I observed it probably twice the following summer. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, this is actually
I'll have to,
happening.
and if I see that, I'll have to grab a like a recorded loop of the radar because that'll be just a cool thing to connect as to how it happens. But always something fun to talk about. I'm not sure what we're talking about next week, but we'll come up with something. Got any ideas?
Gonna do gardening,
I actually
grass
reached out to
growing.
somebody about that because I've fertilized, I've done weed and feed, and it's not working. And then they were like, "You shouldn't have fertilized yet." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I thought it was too late." But
That is weird.
you find a
Shouldn't
gardener
have
that wants to help my
fertilized.
lawn, or send that $30 guy over, and that'd be great.
All right, I'll see if he does long distance mows.
There we go. I could pay for like part of the gas to get here, but $30. I have a big corner lot, so it goes all the way down the sidewalk one way, and then all the way down the other, and then you got to
That's
edge both
why.
sides.
That's why it was so much. Okay, and that makes sense. That makes sense. That big brick house, big corner lot, comes to the territory.
Yeah, the Casa de Chigvera, a lot to maintain, especially with two little kids running around. So, well, good stuff. Thanks as always for tuning in. Weather Wise Guys, 14th episode, pretty exciting, and we're gonna keep doing it. This is fun. Whether we have 6 people watch or over 1,000, it's good stuff.
And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, we are also on Spotify. If you'd rather just listen to this, it's on video Spotify and audio Spotify. So look us up,
There's
Weatherwise
a cool
guys.
thumbnail. Cool thumbnail.
It is. I drew it by hand, and you can definitely tell.
Heck yeah. So, all right, guys, we'll see you next week, probably on Monday, unless the weather does something crazy, which hopefully it doesn't. So have a great week. Enjoy the cool air, warm air, lack of severe. Should be a good one.
See ya.